We'll call the Marathon County Board of Supervisors to order, please. Please rise. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing following the Pledge of Allegiance. There will be a silent moment of reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We will have the reading of the notice, please.
An organizational meeting of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors, composed of 38 members, will convene at the Marathon County Courthouse Assembly Room, 500 Forest Street, Wausau, on Tuesday, April 25th at 7 p.m., and the agenda was duly signed and posted.
Hi, thank you. And I'd like to request everyone, please put your cell phones on mute or vibrate as to not be an interruption to the meeting, and any other electronic devices, please. We will proceed to roll call, and I'd ask everyone to please sign in.
Okay, my computer is doing an update, so if I just can't.
And I thank you. I'd like to welcome all the visitors that we have with us, especially the viewing audience. And we will move on to item number B, education presentation or reports. Item B7, standing committee chairpersons or designees. Any reports by chairpersons or designees? Okay, we'll move on to consent agenda items C8 through items C13E. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Zhang, second by Vice Chair McEwen. Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed to vote.
Yes, aye.
And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried and is unanimous. Thank you. We'll move on to item number D14, Board of Health. I'd ask the clerk to read the appointment.
Appointing Catherine Dively, 308 Fleming Street, Wausau, to the Board of Health for a 2-year term to expire April 30, 2025. This is a reappointment.
What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Leahy and Vice Chair McEwen with a second. Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote.
Aye.
And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried and is unanimous. Thank you. And we will move on to ordinances. Item E15, ordinance electing to proceed under section 75.521 of the Wisconsin statutes in relationship to the enforcement of collection of property taxes, tax liens. Ordinance 0-16-23. Motion by Supervisor Robinson and seconded by Supervisor Vensky. Any discussion? As announced earlier, this allows another tool in the toolbox when potentially taking property under the in rem process versus the tax deed process. Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, fill out your iPad, please. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried, but not unanimous. Okay, item E16, a motion to reconsider creation of an energy task force. Motion by Supervisor Lemmer and seconded by Supervisor Marash. Any discussion? Supervisor Lemmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just, without sounding like a broken record, like to repeat my endorsement of this task force. I feel like it's very important that we take a strategic and systematic look to financially mitigate some of the energy fluctuations that we have had. We have some grant opportunities that we've never had before, so I feel like it would be appropriate for a task force to get together and take a look at the complexities that the offerings, the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act have. I would really like the body to understand that I am not part of the windmills. That is not what I think the vision of this task force would be. So as we reconsider, if we reconsider, I would also just like to suggest that we endorse the task force.
Supervisor Dickinson is next.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to make, my comment would be that the reconsideration at this point really has nothing to do with the task force itself, but really in how we are going to align ourselves with policy. I think that's what the discussion we had last week on Thursday was. And so I think in this situation, given how Corporation Counsel has communicated with us about how we did not follow policy and how there was a mistake in that, that we all should be in support of the reconsideration and then see where the merits of the next vote lie. Thank you.
Supervisor Stravinsky.
Thank you. I agree completely with Supervisor Dickinson. The motion to reconsider is simply bringing that motion back up and doing it correctly through the legal process as we've defined by the board. We're not talking about the actual creation or rejection of the Energy Task Force at this point. We're just agreeing that we're going to go back and revisit that topic.
And again, I'll explain what a motion to reconsider does. It's a simple majority requirement. A motion has to be made, as the Corp Counsel has explained, had to be made by what was deemed the winning side and seconded by anyone. If that motion, which requires a simple majority, were to pass, the board would be back at the position, if we think about it, back at where we were prior to the vote. We would be in discussion phase of whether to create it. So the motion would be on the table at that time, will be the motion that was made and seconded to create the task force, and we'd be in discussion portion. So that, again, right now, it is the motion to reconsider. Supervisor Langenhan, please.
Call the question.
Is there any objection to question being called? Is there a second to the question being called? Second was called by Supervisor Boots. And it's not debatable, and so it does require a 2/3 majority vote. It will take the clerk a little bit of time to put that into. And Supervisor Sandulski is in the queue. He will be allowed to address the question. Supervisor Sandulski.
Okay. First, thank you. I'd like to thank Supervisor Baker for bringing to the attention the board of the 2/3 vote. And I understand people make mistakes, and honestly, everyone here does. We're all human as corporate counsel Puner. But I honestly, I believe it wasn't handled. I believe we could have. He should have went to the will of the board, which was to overturn this but it is what it is, so we're going to have to get, I mean, honestly, we need to get another vote, but to turn it down, but I'm not in favor of it at all. Thank you.
Okay, question's been called. The vote that you are taking now is to end debate. Please understand, you're not on the motion to reconsider. You are simply asked to vote to end debate on the motion to reconsider. Is everybody clear what you're voting on? Okay, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. The motion is carried. It is a 2/3 majority. Debate is ended. And we are now on to the motion that is on the floor now is the motion to reconsider. A yes vote will move towards reconsideration. A no vote will move us towards not reconsidering. Is everybody clear on what you're voting on now? Yeah, all right, we will proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. The motion is carried. We are now at the point, so the motion to reconsider has carried. And now we are at the position of there is a motion and second on the floor to create the task force, the energy task force, and we are now in debate. We are in debate of the creation of the energy task force. So any discussion? Supervisor Scherfinski.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to thank Supervisor Lemmer for starting this process and bringing forward what was initially a very well thought out and well researched goal or recommendation. However, I believe that what's happened and in all of the discussion is that we have gone beyond the idea of a Marathon County Energy Task Force, which was designed with the express purpose of how do we reduce the energy bill, energy usage, because we've seen substantial inflation and impact to our budget. It's now become something quite different. It's now become a nebulous, all-encompassing, well, let's look at that, let's look at solar, let's look at every possible thing that has come out of Washington, D.C., and have basically a green energy agenda promoted through Marathon County. And I think that that is, while the first goal is laudable, and how do we look at our buildings and say how can we make them more energy efficient and tightly focused. The second is pie in the sky, and it's pushing an agenda that I don't think we should be pushing.
Supervisor Crivelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the creation of the Marathon County Energy Task Force is a flawed ordinance. It discriminates against those of us who are engineers that work directly with the energy sector and understand the production and use of energy. And it does that because it's listed as you can only have certain members from the board that are associated with certain committees. Those of us who work directly with the energy sector, such as GE, Mitsubishi Power Generation, Solar Turbines, which is a Caterpillar company, IVIR, and many others, and know the energy efficiency and how they work, we are exempt from being on the task force. We already have an infrastructure committee, and I think we have a capable administrator and deputy administrator that can handle making recommendations to the departments they oversee on saving energy. I think we will have to compensate the task force members, mileage and other expenses, which is a growth in government, which I'm against. I will not be supporting the creation of this task force. Thank you.
Supervisor Robinson.
I support the creation of the task force, and I do that for several reasons. One is we had a significant increase in our cost for utilities last year, impacted by world events, including Ukraine and diversion of fuel stock elsewhere. That's not going away anytime soon. And there are opportunities that present themselves because of the bipartisan infrastructure law that have never been available to local government before in the terms of tax credits for making investments that in the long term save the residents of this county money and allow us to reallocate those operational costs away from utilities into providing services to our residents. And if you're not happy with the membership and want to tweak the membership, please do so with an amendment. I don't think this was meant to be exclusionary. This was a thought that the seed was planted by Administrator Leonard at one of our meetings because he thought that these committees dealt with or had reporting relationships with departments that tended to have higher energy use. But the ability to look at whether we do LED lights in our parks, whether we look at retrofitting buildings or other things, all are on the table. Many of those require some policy changes on the part of the county board, and this is an effort to try to get the discussion going on a policy level to allow us to hopefully realize some savings and take advantage of opportunities.
Supervisor Boots.
Call the question.
Is there any objection to question being called?
I object.
Okay, there's an objection. Is there a second to the question being
Second.
called? Who is the second?
Second, Lamont.
Supervisor Lamont made the second. We will then proceed with everyone that's in the queue that is on the and give them an opportunity to discuss before we proceed. Well, before we proceed to vote. So next we have Supervisor Rosenberg, please.
Help me out here. Anecdotally, I understand that the library did something similar to this and ended up with a savings about $4,000 a month. Does anybody have a?
Administrator, I think are you referring to the cost of air conditioning that was and the upgrade that was made there?
Yeah, and I don't know what the upfront costs were, but apparently the savings are significant month to month.
Administrator Letter will address the.
My recollection is that the library a number of years ago utilized some available funding to make a transition to LED lights throughout their facility. I don't have any, I would be hazarding a very rough guess as to what the energy savings were, but I do know that the library made that and communicated that effort a number of years ago relative to those changes to LED light bulbs.
That's also what I understood, and I got this from a fairly good source who was on the library board, I believe, at the time. It's out there. They saved a lot of money changing the light bulbs.
Supervisor Marash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I asked the question last month, I believe, whether having a task force was a prerequisite to applying for or acquiring any of the grants that would be available to us, and the answer at that point was no. Therefore, we would be able to still get these grants and propose options to the board and be able to accept that and move forward with many different options for saving the county money. The LED light bulbs that have been brought up numerous times will be the only option we have in the very near future because incandescents are not going to be available anymore. I'm in full support and in favor of changing out light bulbs. I do believe that this task force is a little bit like putting the cart before the horse, since we are also going to be voting on consolidating many of our different departments under the Lakeview Drive campus, which will also eventually save the county a lot of money. Once that is complete, then I believe it would be more beneficial to reevaluate and find out where we could save money. So I think it would be better served if we put it on hold and wait for the next board to be seated. Thank you.
Supervisor Stravinsky, and I'll make a note that Supervisor Overbeck, you weren't in the queue prior to the question being called, so unfortunately you wouldn't be able to address the board until after the vote, unless the vote is not to proceed with the question being called. So we have Supervisor Stravinsky next.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to address two things right now. First of all is clearly the process that happened with the library board clearly shows that as a county, the administration has the ability to act and to direct departments, and they can self-direct to look at their energy consumption and say, yeah, ask the question, how can we make our building more energy efficient, or our operations? You know, you could extend that from building, you could extend that to the sheriff's department, looking at how do we purchase rolling stock that is perhaps has better gas mileage, or whatever else it might be. Clearly, the library did that. We did not have an energy task force, so we don't need one for the rest of the facilities to have that process in place. So the task force idea doesn't need to happen. We can do this without one, without expanding government. Supervisor Robinson brought up LED lighting, and LED lighting is one of these things that's rather interesting, and actually I deal with it, or have dealt with it extensively over the last few years. It's a two-edged sword. It's not all good. It can be useful, but there are drawbacks as well. But one of the interesting things that people don't think about is we just talked about, well, the library saved X number of dollars on air conditioning. I'll point out that through a good 6 months out of the year, this is the state of Wisconsin, we aren't doing air conditioning, and every BTU that you have from an incandescent light bulb is one BTU that you are not putting into the building necessarily through the HVAC system. So it's not quite as simple as it would seem. Is it a good idea? Perhaps, but saying that that process is a little bit simplistic. So I'd look at this and I'd say, we need to step back and focus on what should we do. Should the individual departments look at how they can make their buildings or their operations more efficient? Yes. Is that something that can be done by the administration? Does that have to be a policy directive from the board? And the answer is no. The policy directive from the board could be, Mr. Administrator, we would like you to take action to reduce your energy expenditures. You know, it doesn't need to be a new ordinance and a new expansion of government to do that. Thank you.
Supervisor Krause, you're not recognized prior to the motion to question being called, so I can't recognize you in addressing the board. We are now at the point where we will proceed to vote on the question being called. Again, question's been called, and the vote is to end debate. A yes vote will end debate and put us at the point of voting on the motion. But right now, the motion is to end debate. A yes will end debate. A no will not, and continue to debate the item on the floor. Everybody clear on what they're voting on? And we'll proceed. And debate is,
Supposed to be 2/3.
it is not 2/3. I don't believe, where's our 2/3 card? So debate is not ended. We are back in discussion mode on the motion to create the task force. Any further discussion? Supervisor Krause.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. I can't understand why we couldn't do all of the above. That is, have the committees come up with some ideas, that we can have the administration direct the departments to come up with some ideas, and also have a task force. The departments could make suggestions to the task force, and so could the other committees make suggestions to the task force on what they think might be important. And I think that would speed the process up, that the task force would have ideas from several different sources to consider and to look at. And I think it would be a much more interesting and involve more people. And because the way to save money is important to our citizens, and also the way to save the environment at Marathon County is important too. Thank you.
Supervisor Overbeck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things that's important is looking forward, and I think we're taking a step backward when we don't look at energy usage. We're way behind the ball on this. I think Marathon County really has to set policy, and I think that's better done in a smaller group than a group of 38 trying to come to an agreement on what to move forward with. The task force is really there to give guidance, do the research, do the hard work, and then bring it back to the board. I think that's what this task force, we don't know what the results will be. I think you want them to research it and really seek out advice from professionals, from anyone. I mean, from the board members if they want to. But without that guidance, 2030 is the guideline for the federal government and everyone as far as how to address energy usage within the U.S. And that's a worldwide goal too. So I don't know what Marathon County has to gain by actually not going ahead with this task force. I see what they can lose, a lot of time. And then we may be out of time before the costs get so great. Look at your heating bills lately. Look at the cost of electricity. And wait until we start bringing on more electric, whatever, cars, whatever. That cost is only going to go up. Natural gas is going up. Look at what happens when we get into an energy shortage and what happens to our costs. No one's going to push solar on the county, but there are guidelines out there to say, let's go to this goal of energy usage. And LEED was developed probably 10, 15 years ago, and that is a guidance. You get points for everything you do as far as using reusable items, how far it has to be transported. It gets people thinking about what energy is being used, recycling carpet, picking materials that are renewable. It's all of these decisions. I guess if the county board wants to spend a lot of time on developing those priorities and policies and sending it down to the administration, that's what you're going to do. Why not have a task force make recommendations, pick the best of the best, and then move forward with them and take action on them if needed? You can always vote it down. But if you never hear the story about how to better use energy, it's going to cost this county more and more each year. And I think it's time to do it. Don't wait for the next board to do it. Do it now. And as an architect, as engineers, I think everyone is moving in that direction. The people that don't are falling behind. So I really urge this board to move forward with that task force and then listen to them. You have the vote after that, but let them bring forth ideas. I guess that's my recommendation. Thank you.
Supervisor Baker.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. So I'm going to be voting no on this motion for the same reasons that I said at the last meeting. I'm not going to repeat those reasons because there really should have been no reason for another vote. Thank you.
Supervisor Shafinsky.
I would, excuse me, I would like to point out that the reason that we have the incredible spike, the unprecedented spike in energy costs is a result of the direct and unequivocal action of the administration and of the federal government. This is absolutely nothing more or less than a determination to hamstring U.S. energy policy. This is not something that happened as a unintended whirlwind of global events. This was deliberate policy. So let's at least understand what we're reacting to and why. Thank you.
Supervisor Vensky.
I would call the question.
There objection to question being called? Is there a second to the question being called? Questions being seconded by Supervisor Langenhan. And we do have two people in the queue, and that is Supervisor Dickinson and Supervisor Oberbeck. They'll be allowed to speak first prior to voting on question being called. Supervisor Dickinson's next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real briefly here, everybody else had their vote out at the last meeting. So if I was here that last meeting, I would have voted no. So I just want to share that with everyone since we know kind of where everybody else is. I would add, you know, we have two other task force, I believe, maybe a third, but we have broadband and regional morgue. And these are large, significant developmental projects. So I think if the initial suggestion that the Energy Task Force is just going to be kind of a streamlined kind of a thing, that's a little, I don't know if I can fully agree with that. It would seem to me that it will grow and it will be significant over the years, and it is what it is. So I would say if we're going to do something like that, then we should be looking at removing some other kind of entities, some other committees, so that we can go ahead and streamline and make sure that we're just not adding, layering in, whether it's a good idea or not. Thank you.
Supervisor Oberbeck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I question why we wouldn't create a task force to develop this. And anybody that knows economics knows it's all about supply and demand. As a refinery goes offline, watch the gas prices go up the next day. So, I mean, it's all about how much we use. The more we use, the more people that actually start decreasing their use or finding better ways to make more out of less, that's what's going to win the energy contest. And I think we're approaching new facilities, renovating facilities. It's all about how to make those facilities last for 50 years. They're going to be old technology very quickly. As new technology develops, I think we need to know about it. We need to develop the research and just really look at what we're doing as a county. And that takes a policy decision. If that policy decision doesn't happen, we go on as is what it's been happening for years. So I guess when does this move happen? I don't know. If we don't do it today and start the process, then it doesn't move forward. So what are we saying to the residents of Marathon County? That we don't want to address energy, even though it's going up at a very high rate, the cost for the same amount? I mean, we just approved, looking at the landfill and how we can use energy and how to reclaim that. That's part of this process. So I would urge everyone to vote for this because it does no harm. The county board still has the decision, 38 people. And I think the task force with a 38-member board, that's a minor part of that. Add another committee to start the process. You can always stop it. But I think it's going to be a valuable resource in the future. And thanks.
Okay, question's been called and seconded, and we are through the individuals that were in the queue. So now a yes vote with 2/3 majority required will end debate. No vote will continue debate. Is everybody clear on what we're voting on? We'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And debate is ended. We are at the point now where we are going to vote on the motion. And the motion is to create the Energy Task Force. A yes vote, again, does require a 2/3 majority. A 2/3 majority will then create the task force. Less than 2/3 majority will not create the task force. Is everybody clear on what we're voting on? We'll proceed to vote.
I'm suddenly having technical issues, but it's a yes.
And we'll proceed. And the motion is defeated, and it is not 2/3. Moving on, from the Executive Committee, updates to the Marathon County Strategic Plan. What is your pleasure? Motion by Robinson, second by Zhang. Any discussion? Supervisor Sandalski.
Yeah, I would like to make a motion to amend the strategic plan on 5.2F. I would like to remove the 5.2F to acquire land for parks and forest use to retain the landscape and resource. I'd like to remove that. Reason being, right now, I got the paperwork I printed right off the website. We currently have 30,674 acres of forestry and another 3,400 in parks, 18 parks, and I believe it was 10 forestry. So, and we had this discussion in my town's meeting in Bergen here because we got the mead there, and that's a real hit on our tax revenue, and it hurts. It hurts not only the townships as far as tax revenue, and also it hurts the county too, but more so the small townships as far as taking land off the private property, and I believe in private property and property rights. So that's all I got. And I would like to make the motion to amend the strategic plan to remove that. Thank you.
So can I clarify, you're removing just the outcome measure, 5.2?
The 5.2F, the one for acquiring the public parks and for forestry land, 5.2F.
So there's a motion to remove 5.2F. Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Supervisor Marash. Is there a discussion? Supervisor Langenhan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was actually going to offer an amendment to change that verbiage of that language, but I'm fine providing this information now. The first thing I would request is that wherever that information was cited from that Supervisor Sandalski just cited in his report, to please have that verified with our staff, which I believe Director Polly is joining us online right now. Oh, never mind. She's here. So that's the first thing I'd like to request. I want to add a couple pieces of information based on the concerns from last week. And I can understand with the word will, that can be a very imposing word as far as the county being tasked with acquiring more land. I do, like I said, I want to give a little bit more information tonight. That 320 acre average, first of all, that's not specifically mentioned in the Forestry Division work plan, but it is included on page 29 of the county 5-year comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, as well as referenced numerous times throughout that document. It was also in the 2006-2020 county forest comprehensive land use plan. And while that is not specifically included in the 2021 to 2035 plan, in discussion with staff, they've indicated that acreage reference was carried over to that plan based on the public comments supporting additional land purchases. And I think that's important because we're actually hearing from the public that for the sake of enhancing the natural resources that we have in this county, they would like to see those resources continue to be enhanced. That 320 acres, and I think staff would be able to provide more clarity here. That's not an arbitrary number that staff came up with. It's based on a concept, to my understanding, called blocking, where there's a certain amount of acres per 1,000 person and population out there, so that if people do feel the inclination to go out and recreate, that there's land within a reasonable distance from them that they can go and do so. So according to this, it is 250 acres of parks and forest available per 1,000 residents. And if you break that number down, it's 200 acres for forest and 120 acres for parks. In addition to that, the 320 acre number, I think, was included specifically because if we're talking about planning, right, you want there to be SMART goals that are out there. And one of those things that you have to do is add a targeting number. You have to be able to quantify something. So I think that based on the planning that the county had already done, that's why that 320 acre number was included, so that the county actually had something to measure baseline to. Couple more things, and I know that taxes get brought up a lot in regard to the land that's out there and the aid that is given to towns specifically. I want to break a couple of those things down. So a lot of the property holders that sell forest land to the county already have their land classified as managed forage land, or what some of you might have heard referred to as MFL land. That land already has a reduced property tax rate, which impacts the tax revenue of that particular town. Towns get a 10% cut of gross timber sales per the number of acres of county forest within their town. So that's the first piece of aid that towns have. Secondly, during the last cycle of the state budget, the legislature approved an increase in the county forest share payment. Towns now get 63 cents per acre of payment in lieu of taxes. Previously, it was 30 cents per acre. The other thing I'm going to mention, our county only works with willing landowners, right? We're not going out, we're not trying to bid up the market. These are just people that want to see their land continue to be conserved, and there's an opportunity with the county to do so. Towns are consulted prior to this land being purchased by the county, so that does play a role in the decision-making process. In fact, we purchased a piece of land, I don't know if it was this term or last term, but we actually did have engagement from the local government. While there is no program that provides compensation to towns that have county parkland, and I'm not talking about forest land, just parkland, there is a state program that provides funding assistance to town roads that lead to parks and forests. So unfortunately, some of my notes here are based on the amendment of, and maybe I'll get to talk about that amendment later. But really what I would like to see is some flexibility provided to the county, that we have a quantifiable goal for this, that we provide interested landowners the ability to conserve their land if possible. And the third thing I'm going to reiterate, even if the county kept up with that 320 acre land goal, which to the best of my knowledge, it's only met once in the past 20 years, the county would still be at a deficit by 2030 in both parks and forestry. This is just giving some flexibility to the residents and to our staff who are just protecting our natural resources within the county. So I would ask you to vote against the amendment before you this evening. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? The amendment is to remove the item 52F. 52F. We got Supervisor Marash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Supervisor Longenhan for all that information. One of my questions was where the 320 acres came from, so I appreciate all of that. This is an outcome measure, so the way I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that it does not stop us from buying additional land. We can buy additional land. And like I mentioned last week, I'm in support of purchasing land if it's adjacent to other land that we already own, if it becomes available. Or if we have other property owners that are interested in selling the county land, by all means, if that goes through the board and we decide we'd like to purchase it, perfect. I don't like the 320 acres. We haven't, like Supervisor Longenhan mentioned, we've only maybe done that once. So I just don't believe that this outcome measure is something that is necessary. We can still go ahead and purchase land. Thank you.
Supervisor Robinson.
I'd encourage us to keep it in there. The Greater Wausau Prosperity Partnership, which is trying to create a vision for the future in part of their strategic planning process, identified goal 3, placemaking, develop quality places and amenities to attract the best and the brightest. And one of the things in there that they say the traditional model of economic development has been turned on its head in recent years. Rather than attracting companies and expecting workers to follow, successful communities develop a quality environment that attracts the best and the brightest, which causes companies to take notice and expand into locations where they can access top talent. And included in there is a discussion of parks and the value of parks. We're not making more land. And our parks and our forests have multiple purposes: recreational, relieving stress. One of the things that we found through the pandemic is that the people's ability to commune with outdoors was very beneficial from reducing it. But our forests also have an economic value in the fact that they support industries where loggers come in and log the land, and we receive money, and the towns in which they're located receives money. So I think that the concept of blocking and having goals in acquisition is important for us if we want to work with the Greater Wausau Prosperity Partnership relative to that placemaking, make this attractive community, and protect the parks and try to fill in those blocks and reach out for new opportunities as they present themselves.
Supervisor Dickinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I do recall discussing this at another time. I don't know what meeting that was, but I recall speaking with Supervisor Longenhahn about the average of 320 acres question and concern that I had at that time. I do also recall, perhaps in that same meeting, and I could be wrong on this, but there really wasn't a mid and long-term parks plan for where parks were going to be developed throughout the county. So when you're talking about potentially acquiring land and such, if you have a plan, you can kind of direct yourself towards maybe potential landowners who would be looking to sell and that sort of thing. So, so there are some concerns in that for me. I do have one clarification to ask. So, would the motion was for 5.2F to be removed? I would assume that would also strike outcome measure 3, or does that have to be stated specifically?
Corp Counsel, please.
I think that would have to be stated specifically because I don't think it's clear in the document that 3 is directly tied to F, so I think it would have to be stated.
Okay, moving on. Supervisor Shafinsky.
Thank you, Chair. I will be voting in support of the amendment, and the reason for that is I agree with the notion that if a landowner wants to approach Marathon County and says, I have X number of acres adjacent to a park or a forest, would you be interested? I'd like to sell it to you. I'm deciding that it's time for me to downsize, I'm going to move, whatever their rationale might be. That seems to make perfect sense. The concern that I have with the goal, and the stated goal of 320 acres or 100 or whatever it might be, is the idea that government constantly increases. Every time we put together a program, it never dies. It's immortal. And this rather innocuous, well, it's only 320 acres, and we've only done it once or twice, but it's still this idea that the Parks Department, the county forests, should constantly increase, and that there should be a bias towards constantly increasing the amount of county-owned land in the county. And that's what I will be voting against. Thank you.
Supervisor Longenhahn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I respect those points. They're all very valid points. I view this more, instead of a mandate for the staff to go out and get more property, I view it more as a flexibility for the county when these opportunities come up to pursue those opportunities, rather than a commandment that you shall go out and acquire this average of 320 acres. And just so we're clear, that was related to the amendment that I was going to propose initially prior to this current amendment that we have in front of us this evening. I do want to give Director Polly an opportunity to talk a little bit about the parks plans that we already have in place, because we do have is it a 5-year or 15-year plan? Would you mind explaining those a little bit more?
Is there any objection to having the Parks Director provide clarity on the questions being posed? Nope. Parks Director Polly, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Thank you, Supervisor Longenhan. I have some notes here because we talked about this earlier, just so I can point out the exact pages too. But the county board has approved both a 5-year comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, which we update every 5 years. We have a current one that went through 2020 to 2024. So that was approved. We also have a 15-year comprehensive land use plan for our county forestry. Both are on our web page. They're easily accessible. I think everybody may have gotten a copy prior to this board, of the board that was in place when this was approved. But in our outdoor recreation plan, it does speak to our future and long-term goals of park and park development and really where we are lacking. So the county board, when we do our updates to our outdoor recreation plan as well as our 15-year forestry plan, it's about a year process for that update. We get a lot of public input. We bring it in front of the boards and committees for input before we finalize that document. And the county board actually sets goals of what your goals are to provide park and open space to the members of our county. So in that document, in Chapter 4, in the Outdoor Recreation Plan now, on page 34 and 35, it talks about the quantitative analysis. And the county board at that point would like to see 250 acres of park and forest land, so just public space, doesn't matter if it's park or forest, per 1,000 residents was the goal that was set. So when they look out towards 2030, since it's a 5-year plan, but we do a plan out to 2030. We show by the estimated growth in population of Marathon County that the county will be at a deficit of 4,060 acres by 2030 to not meet that goal of that 250 acres per 1,000 residents of our county. That's for dual park and forest. For just parkland, the goal is 26 acres per 1,000 residents because when we look at the county, we look at a 20-minute drive time to parks. We don't look at in the city for our outdoor recreation plan, which we have a separate one, it's a 10-minute walk, and that's a national standard for providing park or open space to residents of your community in a city, is a 10-minute walk. So we identify areas in the county that we're lacking. We are lacking in some areas of Western County, which I know has been brought up at a few other meetings to keep looking at opportunities for enhancing our Western County to provide that open space. But for parkland, 26 acres per 1,000 residents, based on our projection, we'll have a deficit of 170 acres by 2030. So if we just looked at parkland, if we average a 24 acres per year for the next 8 years by 2030, we would have exactly what we need for our residents based on our plan. In order to make that 4,060 acre deficit not be there in the next 8 years, we would have to purchase over 500 acres, which our 300 acres don't get us there. And like Supervisor Longenhan said, we're not going out and seeking land, but we are available. Now, this is your strategic plan, so whether you want it as a goal, that's up to you as a county board. It's still in your comprehensive plan that is driving your strategic plan. It's in your outdoor recreation plan. It's in your 15-year plan. So it is still there for us to work off of if we have willing landowners. We do bring it through, it has to come through the board, any land purchase we do. It goes to the townships first. If the townships tell us, no, we don't want you to purchase land in our township, it doesn't even get to the board because we stop it there. We don't go against that. And we do have at least 2 townships in our county that do not want to see any more land purchased. So if we have a landowner that comes to us in those 2 counties, we typically say, no, we know that we can't even take it to the town board because they will say no. So we do respect the town's input on that. Then we bring it to the county board or through the committees, and then you have the ultimate say. But any more information, Mr. Longenhan, that you want me to?
I have a question, it's for her.
I'll request to speak, and then we'll do it in order.
Any more information?
Well,
Well, Supervisor Wilhelm is the next person to speak anyway.
I still have the floor.
What's that?
Do I still have the floor?
You still have the floor.
Thanks, Tom. I'd like to ask one more question to Director Polly.
By all means. Please use the mic.
Yes. Then can you verify how much parkland and forest land that we currently have in the county?
Yeah, the numbers stated were correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And that is on our website. I do want to point out that when you look at the landmass of Marathon County, because we are as big as, Rhode Island, of the landmass of Marathon County, because we're very agricultural, there's only 27% of Marathon County that is forested, and only 7% of the county is public. So the rest of the other 20% is all private land that's, a lot of it's in MFL, as mentioned, so it's reduced tax base. That's how, a lot of land is put in, but only 7% of our forests are in public ownership for the county of the landmass that we have.
Thank you. I yield the floor.
Okay, Supervisor Wilhelm is next.
The land deficiency, does that include the open forest land that's open to the public? Because like where I live, there's a Amco Park, but I mean, most of it is open forest by either a timber company or individuals that have it in open forest, so they pay a reduced rate. Is that added on to your public land?
No, this is just the plan just talks about the publicly owned land of what we have that we have control over. So it does not include private land that could be open to the public.
Okay, because I know there's quite a bit where I live myself, so it's
Yes.
just wondering if that was added on. But I mean, I use public land, but as you were stating, the amount of forested land in Marathon County is small compared to the ag land. And when we start taking that out, if we take huge swaths out, and then you have individuals that want to purchase some land, what it's going to do is you're going to start seeing prices go up if the county ends up purchasing more than in the county. And when you look at land values right now, and if they keep creeping up because people can't, more people are competing for a small piece of land, we're going to start seeing higher property rates going up, and it might deter people from wanting to be here and maybe go up north or somewhere else where land might be more affordable. That was just something I want to bring up, so I will vote yes with Tim.
Could I add something, Chair Gibbs?
Go ahead, please.
Just to clarify, too, to that point, is when the county is asked to purchase land from a willing landowner, the county won't pay any more than the appraised value. I get the appraised and the assessed. The appraised value. So we don't do competitive bidding against any other buyers of land. If they won't sell it to us at the appraised value, then we will walk away also. So in that respect, we won't drive up prices because we won't pay that much. So we'll walk away.
Okay, Supervisor Sandalski.
Yeah, I just would like to revise my amendment. I would like to add the number 3 on the outcome, so 5.2F, and also number 3 on the outcome measure. I would like to strike that one out too. Thank you.
So this is an amendment to an amendment. Do we need to have a second to the amendment to the amendment? Supervisor Marash with a second. So now we're on debate of item removal of 5.2 outcome measure number 3. Is there any further discussion on that motion itself to amend the amendment? Because we are too far into discussion for it to be just added to the original motion to amend. So is there any further discussion on a amendment to the amendment, and that is to remove outcome measure under 5.2 outcome measure number 3? Supervisor Seibert.
Thank you. I've had my button pushed, or I guess it didn't go through. It didn't go through. But the question I have, if we talk about so many acres per 1,000 people, Marathon County has a tremendous state land, wooded state land, thousands and thousands of acres. Is that included in our 1,000 people? And how much, if you include that, which is public property, anybody can walk it, anybody can hunt it, anybody can do anything, what that brings our amount of people down to if we include the state property. And I'm talking about the Mead Wildlife Area. And then the state park, I mean, we have state parks, we have, does that bring us under that threshold?
I'll have to do the math on that. I'm not sure that I know that's referenced, the Mead and the McMillan Marsh, as well as the state parks and any other state land that is referenced in our outdoor recreation plan. I guess I will verify if that's included or not in that. But if it's not and it's added to it, it does bring it down, so that deficit is much less, but we still will have a deficit because that, I believe, does not equal 4,000 acres. But I can look at it.
20,000 acres. Mead Wildlife Area is 20,000 acres. It runs for almost 18 miles.
I'll verify because I do know it's addressed in our outdoor recreation plan. I don't know if it's in this number.
Supervisor Zhang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I call the question.
Is there objection to question being called? Is there a second to the question being called? Second by Supervisor Rosenberg. Okay, there's nobody in the queue. And the question, now we are voting on simply the question being called to terminate discussion on the amendment to the amendment. Again, the question that is being called, or the vote you're taking, is to end debate on the amendment to the amendment, and that is to remove item outcome measure under item 5.2, item outcome measure 3. Again, this ends debate. A yes vote by 2/3 majority ends debate. No continues the debate on the amendment to the amendment. Is everybody clear? Supervisor Langenhan.
I think Supervisor Rosenberg had the second.
Supervisor Rosenberg has the second. Okay, again, a yes vote with 2/3 majority ends debate. We'll proceed to vote. We'll proceed. And debate is ended. We are now on to the question of, we are on the motion to amend the amendment to add item outcome measure 3 and eliminate that from 5.2. And again, so a yes vote is a simple majority. Will eliminate item 5.2 outcome measure 3. A no vote will allow it to stay in. Corp Counsel wants to clarify.
Just to clarify, so a yes vote on this amendment to the amendment would add the removal of outcome measure 3 to the original amendment proposed by Supervisor Sandelsky. You would still need to vote on that original amendment, which removes F. If you approved the amendment to the amendment, it would also remove 3. But right now, you're just voting on whether to add the removal of outcome measure 3 to Supervisor Sandelsky's original amendment.
Is everybody clear? We'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. It fails. Okay. It fails. The vote was 16-17. It did not receive a majority vote. So now we're back to the original motion. And Supervisor Zhang was next in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to call the question.
Second, Lamont.
Question's been called on and seconded on debate on now the original motion, and that was to remove item 5.2F. And we had Supervisor Shafinsky in the queue. Supervisor Shafinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to add the following information. If you look up at the McMillan Marsh website, you'll find that that area is 33,000 acres. So that would more than make up any 4,000 acre shortfall.
Okay, motion's been called and seconded to end debate. We are now on to, we will vote on whether to end debate. And so again, this is not a motion to strike it. It is a motion to end debate. 2/3 majority required. All those will proceed to vote. Everybody clear? And Supervisor Seibert? I need you to vote. Thank you. And we'll proceed. Debate is ended, and now we're on to the motion before the board, and that was, the motion was to remove item 5.2F. And so is everybody clear? A yes vote does remove it. A no vote will allow it to stay in. And it is simple majority. Are we clear? Anybody not? We'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion fails. We're now back to the original motion, the motion to approve the strategic plan. Any discussion? Supervisor Langenhan.
No, Supervisor Baker's first.
Oop. Supervisor Baker, excuse me. I had my computer in the way.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. I would like to make a motion to amend Objective 10.6, Outcome Measure 3, and Outcome Measure 4. So I would like to amend Outcome Measure 3 to read, by August 31st, 2023, with input from non-EED supervisors and other Marathon County stakeholders, the EED Committee will prepare recommendations for Marathon County government's role in supporting affordable, high-quality childcare. And Outcome Measure 4 would be amended to be, by August 31st, 2023, with input from non-EED supervisors and other Marathon County stakeholders, the EED Committee will prepare recommendations for Marathon County government's role in supporting safe and affordable housing options. I had a concerned citizen contact me and say that as they are written, the outcome measures are not transparent and are and vague, basically. So that's the reason for the amendment, request for amendment. So we would be adding the words, the EED Committee will, to both outcome measures.
Is there a second? Supervisor Zhang, did you make the, excuse me, that's the original, excuse me. So Supervisor Baker with the second, or with the motion, and the second by Supervisor Marash. And that would be to add the words, the EEDC Committee will prepare its recommendations. Is there any discussion? Okay. Just a second, the clerk's got to put into the record system the motion in a second. Okay, we have Supervisor Langenhan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if it's possible. Can we see those written out on the screen or something like that? I couldn't jot the words down quick enough. I apologize. Thank you.
We'll have the administrator, please, will provide those written out. Supervisor Baker, do we have it captured correctly?
Yes.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Okay. Supervisor Longenhan? No. All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. We're voting on whether or not to amend the two that are in front of you by August 31st, 2023, with the input from non-triple ED supervisors and other Marathon County stakeholders. The Triple EDC committee will prepare recommendations for the Marathon County government's role in supporting affordable, high-quality health care. And the 4 is being amended to by August 31st, 2023, with the input from non-triple ED supervisors and other Marathon County stakeholders. The Triple EDC will prepare recommendations for Marathon County government's role in supporting safe and affordable housing options. So again, we're adding it, the Triple EDC will is what's being added on both. Everybody clear? We'll proceed to vote. Now we'll proceed, and the motion is carried. Any further discussion? Supervisor Baker?
Thank you, Chair Gibbs.
Go ahead, Supervisor Baker.
Just a second. I am forwarding you a motion so that you can put it up. So I'm making a motion to add to Objective 10.8 Strategy C and Outcome Measure 3. Strategy C is support efforts to develop a Kowalski Road I-39 interchange to enhance job creation and accelerate housing development. And the Outcome Measure 3 is by September 30th, 2023, pass a resolution of support for the Kowalski Road I-39 interchange, which is expected to provide traffic and economic development benefits to residents of Marathon County, including residents of the village of Cronenweder, Rothschild, and Weston, in order to give the village of Cronenweder the assurance of political support needed to justify the expenditure of more than $250,000 for an interchange justification report.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Hardinger. Any discussion? Just a second, I'll have to have the clerk pull up the, okay, we're at discussion. Okay, Supervisor Longenhan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did not support, I should say they are slightly different than how they were presented at the executive committee initially, but I still do not support this at the moment as well. I don't want our county plan, the keyword being county, to become a wish list for all the communities within Marathon County. On top of that, I have some very, very big concerns about towns being left out of this picture as far as, identifying these developments within urban areas, which, yes, urban areas have different opportunities compared to rural areas out there. But, there's a lot of economic activity that happens out in towns as well. And I think that to put a spotlight on one area of the county, a more urban area, I would say, really is a slap in the face to our rural areas, because there's plenty of economic opportunity out in the rural areas rather than picking on one specific area throughout the county. Last thing I'll say is that if we do this for, the metro area over near Cronewater, Rothschild, in that area, how long is it going to be before the city of Wausau starts bringing projects to our attention to add to our strat plan? I think we need to start considering that as a possible fallout ramification with doing something like this. I am strongly against this. I think it has no place in our county plan. Thank you.
Supervisor Baker.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. So I'm going to give a little background of the request. So the village of Cronewater is incorporated in 2002. The first request that Cronewater made for a Kowalski Road interchange was in 1997. A year after the highway was granted interstate status. So Cronewater has been working on developing an interchange for about 25 years. The village took a major step forward in 2008 when the village constructed a new 4-lane Kowalski Road overpass. When the Kowalski Road overpass was completed in 2008, it was designed to be on and off ramp ready. The overpass can be converted to an interchange with minimal infrastructure modification to the overpass portion of the previous project. At some point, the village was able to successfully add funding of the Kowalski Road interchange to the Wisconsin statutes in 8402, parent 14. It is my understanding that this Wisconsin statute requires the Wisconsin DOT to design and allocate funds for construction of the interchange if it is found that the construction of the interchange would have no impact on safety in the vicinity of the interchange. In 2021, the North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission completed a 62-page economic impact study that predicted the interchange would provide fair market value real estate valuation growth between $72 million and $120,400,000 and is expected to create between 1,200 and 2,100 new jobs. From the housing presentation at our 3/21/23 board meeting, the municipalities within Marathon County with the three largest 2000 to 2020% change in total housing units were the villages of Cronewater at 71.8%, Weston at 37.8%, and Rothschild at 24.4%. The Kowalski Road interchange should provide traffic benefits to all three of these villages. During the development of the updates to the strategic plan, Strategy C was first proposed at EEDC at our August 4th, 2022 meeting. There was substantial discussion, and as a result, I offered to arrange for a subsequent educational presentation. Dave Mack, the director of the Wausau MPO, provided an educational presentation to EEDC at our September 1st, 2022 meeting. When he was at EEDC, Dave Mack stated that building a Kowalski Road interchange would stimulate both housing development and job creation within the county. At that September 1st, 2022 meeting, the members of the EED committee present for the meeting voted unanimously to forward Strategy C and an earlier version of the Outcome Measure 3 to the Executive Committee. There were numerous objections to the strategy and outcome measures at the Executive Committee meeting. The proposals were sent back to EEDC for further consideration with numerous requested changes. I attempted to draft language responsive to these requests, but was ultimately not able to draft a version that was acceptable to the Executive Committee. I believe that in total, various versions of the proposal were considered by EEDC twice, with approval both times, and at the Executive Committee on 3 separate occasions, all unsuccessfully. I will briefly summarize these objections and provide responses. 1, it is not appropriate for the county to write a strategy and outcome measure for the benefit of a single municipality. This project would actually provide benefits to the entire county in the form of industrial development, job creation, and housing development. The cost of the study would be paid for by the village of Cronewater, but the benefits would accrue much more broadly. 2, we don't have enough employees now, so we should not be creating new jobs. I'm not sure how to respond to this statement. I wonder if McDevco and Chamber support this viewpoint. 3, there's a large slab of concrete across the street. Any available federal or state dollars should be used in Wausau. Otherwise, we might end up with another successful development at Rib Mountain that takes away from Wausau. It is important that Wausau remains a successful and vibrant city, but I don't think that all development dollars should just go to Wausau. 4, I am not going to support the interchange because it's not likely to happen. Staff from the village of Croninwater recently contacted Wisconsin DOT staff and asked if they were aware of the Kowalski interchange project. The Wisconsin DOT staff response was that they were aware of the project and that it was a politically sensitive project, meaning basically not all communities within our county are in favor of this project. I also heard that there is a politically sensitive project from other transportation engineers. If the political leaders of the county won't commit to supporting this project, why should Croninwater spend $250,000 of the Croninwater taxpayer dollars for the interchange study? If we won't support a project that has the potential to increase housing development at no direct cost to Marathon County taxpayers, other than those who are residents of Croninwater, are we really serious about encouraging housing development? Thank you for your consideration.
Supervisor Robinson.
This issue's been around for quite some time, but it's been before the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is comprised of all the communities in the area. They adopt a transportation improvement plan, which is necessary to get funding for any project, and it's been delineated in that plan. But the next step is for the community to complete the study. And one of the reasons why the study is needed is to look at the impacts on the area. This is a project on a state and federal, well, an interstate system, and they need to work with those people to get the approval. The county is not engaged in that process. There are concerns on the part of some of the communities within the metropolitan area about what another interchange will be. If you look at downtown Wausau, it is no longer a viable commercial center. All of those businesses were relocated. If you continue to develop interchanges, you need to know what the potential impacts are on other communities in the county, which is why you do the study. But nobody in the Metropolitan Planning Organization has opposed the study. It's up to Croninwater to follow the rules and get that study done. They don't want to follow the rules. They want to sidestep the rules and get other people involved before their time for that involvement. Supervisor Lonahan is right. If we start doing this, the Village of Marathon City will be in asking for us to support their frontage roads and TIF investments in their industrial park for housing and other things. When does it end? Our strategic plan should drive our actions, and the communities need to follow the processes relative to planning and the appropriate approvals for their own projects.
I will make a couple comments. I had the opportunity the other day to drive Highway I-39 from Mosinee to Wausau, and the Kowalski interchange is not quite 2 miles from the interchange at Rothschild. So, and as Supervisor Robinson pointed out, there's an economic impact study that needs to be done. It hasn't been done. If the economic impact study shows that the interchange is needed and the safety concerns are addressed, or there is no increase in safety concerns, I will fully support an interchange at that time. But I can't support a potential interchange now until that is done, until that study is done and shows the benefit to the county long term. Supervisor Boots.
Call a question.
Question's called. Is there any objection to question being called? Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Rosenberg. Okay, there was 2 people in the queue, and that was Supervisor Baker and Supervisor Marshall. So Supervisor Marshall was next, and I inadvertently hit the proceed button. Supervisor Marshall is recognized.
Actually, I was calling question as well.
Supervisor Baker.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. Just to clarify, the economic impact study was done. It was done in 2021. It was a 62-page economic impact study that predicted the interchange would provide fair market value real estate valuation growth between $72,200,000 and $120,400,000, and it's expected to create between 1,200 and 2,100 new jobs. Thank you.
I misspoke. It was feasibility study, excuse me. Motion's been called, question has been called, and we will proceed on the vote to end debate. A yes vote needing 2/3 majority will end debate on this amendment, and no vote will continue the debate. Is everybody clear? We'll proceed to a vote. There's a lot of people that haven't voted. Can you put it up on the screen so we can see?
We have voted.
And we'll proceed. Debate is ended. We will proceed to the motion as on the table to amend and include the wording of Objective 10.8 to encourage development and redevelopment of key employment centers in the areas that possess strong market potential, provide good transportation access for workers, and promote the efficient movement of goods. Strategy C, to support efforts to develop the Kowalski Road interchange, I-39 interchange, to enhance job creation and accelerate housing development. Outcome measure 3, by September 30th, 2023, pass a resolution of support for the Kowalski Road I-39 interchange, which is expected to provide traffic and economic development benefits to residents of Marathon County, including the residents of the village of Cronewitter, Rothschild, and Weston, in order to give the village of Cronewitter the assurance of political support needed to justify the expenditure of a $250,000 in Cronewitter village funds for an interchange justification report. Is everybody clear? We'll proceed. And we'll proceed. And the motion is defeated. Now we're back to the strategic plan in the original motion. Supervisor Langenhan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to propose the amendment that I alluded to earlier. So this is on page 113 of the packet that was posted on the website today for 5.2 objective measure number 3. It currently reads, by December 31st, 2024, an average of 320 acres of land per year will be acquired for the Marathon County Parks and Forest System. I would like to change that to read, by December 31st, 2024, an average of 320 acres of land per year may be acquired for the Marathon County Parks and Forest System.
Changing the word from will to may.
That's correct.
Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Shafinsky. Any discussion on the amendment? Just a second, I'll ask the clerk to get the motion as amended in. Okay, any discussion? Again, Supervisor Langenhan?
I'll be brief. I wanted to propose this amendment originally tonight because I know the concern was with the word will. I'm trying to provide flexibility here. I'm trying to find a compromise. We simply change the word from will to may. That way it doesn't give the impression of a mandate to our staff to go out and get this land. May gives the flexibility that if these opportunities come up in the future, that we could continue to do so. And of course, those opportunities would have to be approved by the county board before any purchases would be made. I'll be brief. Like I said, thank you.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Again, the motion is to amend the will to may. All those, we will proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried as unanimous. Moving on, back to the strat plan as amended. Supervisor Boots, were you in the queue?
I think Supervisor Zhang is first in the queue.
Supervisor Zhang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to call the question.
Question's been called on the motion to approve the strategic plan now as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor Lamont. Any discussion? Oh, it's not debatable, excuse me. We will proceed to vote. Now, the motion is to end debate on the strategic plan update approval as amended. The one amendment was the amendment that was approved by the board was the amendment offered by Supervisor Langenhan. So any further discussion is if a vote of yes by 2/3 ends debate, no, we will continue debate. So is everybody clear what we're voting on? We're voting on ending debate. Okay, we'll proceed. Does require a 2/3 majority. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. Debate is ended on the strategic plan update as amended. We will then now proceed to vote on the motion on adoption of the Marathon County Strategic Plan Update, Resolution 16-23, as amended. Is everybody clear on the motion? We'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. Thank you. We will proceed on to Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee. Under G19, support the operational plan for future use of Lakeview Drive Campus A and B buildings, Resolution 22-23. Motion by Robinson, second by Supervisor Zhang. Any discussion? There was a few additional updates that was going to be provided. Chair Robinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the last meeting, there were a number of questions that were asked relative to the plan, and Deputy Administrator Holman pulled together some information. The estimated cost of the renovation project is approximately $4 million. The property on Thomas Street was recently appraised, and the value of that is slightly over $3 million. There's not been a corresponding appraisal on River Drive, but it is a larger footprint and more square footage. So, the value is dependent upon when do we sell. We still have an occupant on Thomas Street in the credit union, and we have multiple occupants on River Drive. But clearly, I think the value of those facilities is much greater than the cost to renovate. There are some significant savings associated with closing down the River Drive. Savings are approximately $56,600 a year, and social services $69,311. Now, some of those will be transferred to the new facility, but we will more likely see significant savings in less snow plowing, energy cost, and other things. And we also get the benefit of having the co-location of multiple agencies in one facility, which will hopefully increase not only operational efficiencies for our departments, but also increase the access to the public in a one-stop stop center. So I think that from a dollars and cents, if we can vacate those properties and ultimately dispose of them, we'll have a higher return than if we continue to occupy them, and we will receive some operational savings.
Any further discussion? Okay, we will proceed to vote. Vote in favor, a vote yes will support the operational plan, a vote no will do the opposite.
Mr. Chairman, I had my hand up.
I apologize. Can I now declare the vote and not record the vote? Call the vote. Okay, Supervisor Lamont, please. And I haven't called for the review of the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a question. Has it been looked into in these renovations, whether we could have updated a kitchen there to be used? I know we looked at the healthcare center that they said we couldn't use their kitchen, and I don't know what the problems, if it was too small or there was a lack of workers too, but could we possibly utilize any of that space to have a nicer kitchen? Thank you.
I would I'll direct that question to the Deputy Administrator, Chris Holman. Chris, please.
The quick answer, Mr. Chair, is that we did look at that space, and ultimately the construction timetable, along with the current need in terms of the project that we'll be talking about next, is too far down the road. You know, just as an example, you've heard many times that lead times for things like an air handler is at least 52 weeks. So in theory, yes, it could be a light at the end of the tunnel if you moved in that direction, but it wouldn't be a real viable option for a solution. And then also speaking with, well, referring to some vendors in terms of the space and what it would be used for, they felt that, you know, in its historic use, it made sense, but now with the transportation issues and the other related issues in terms of staffing and things like that, it wouldn't make as much sense as the alternative.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We will proceed to vote now, and that will allow a little extra time if people want to choose to change their vote with the additional information. Okay. Anybody wish to change their vote? I know. All right, we will proceed with the vote. And the motion is carried. And we will move on to item number G, 20, to amend the 2023 capital improvement budget for Marathon County Jail Kitchen Project 23SH-03C in the amount of $64,205 Phase 1, and the transfer would be from ARPA. Resolution 23-23. Motion by Supervisor Robinson, seconded by Supervisor Wilhelm. Any discussion? Supervisor Arstead.
Do we have a balance yet as to where we're at with the ARPA funds?
Supervisor Robinson?
Supervisor or Administrator Leonard was preparing that yesterday, so I'll turn it over to him.
Okay. Supervisor, Administrator Leonard, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do have a balance, and I'll qualify it with one fact. Last year, the board encumbered $10,337,000 for spending within the Highway Department for infrastructure development. Ultimately, through your budget deliberations, you did not move forward with utilizing American Rescue Plan Act dollars for a significant amount of highway projects, with the rationale being a concern that American Rescue Plan Act dollars would not be general transportation aid eligible funding sources. So with the qualification that assuming you essentially unencumber that $10.337 million, the board would still have $15.49 million of American Rescue Plan Act funds of your original $26.3 million, should you do that.
Okay, when did he raise his hand?
Okay, Supervisor Shafinsky is next.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a question for the Deputy Administrator or the Administrator. During our discussions regarding this, I had asked if we have some type of an estimate of what the Phase 2 or the finish of that project would be. So I'm going to ask if there was any investigation as to what Phase 2 or the completion of that would be. Thank you.
The short answer is no, we didn't estimate that, but I can tell you that because it's a known space, the work that's going to need to be done in that space is going to be far more, it's going to be less than what you would see in other projects. It's precisely because the layout is known, HVAC has upgrades have recently done in that area adjacent to that. So in terms of structural, mechanicals, electrical, plumbing, all that, there's not a lot of work to do there. It's the same reason that facilities and capital management can run that project on their own without any sort of outside assistance, which will also be cost savings. And so it's really going to be driven by ultimately the menu that gets put together by a vendor, which dictates the equipment you need in that space to prepare it. And so the equipment is also something we can mitigate costs in because the old kitchen was referenced earlier. There is some still in storage, and anything that can work in the new space, presuming that this goes forward, would be brought over and not bought new. So without an actual ballpark estimate to it, I can say that we're doing everything we can in terms of finding ways to mitigate the costs so that at the end of the day, the work that needs to get done to bring that up to an operational space will be comparatively minimal to everything else you've been discussing, or to pretty much any other project we've done.
Supervisor Baker.
I'll get Lamont next.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. So I'm going to support this project, and basically, I looked up a few numbers which are, back of the envelope EWAGs, but still gives me something to go on. So Deputy Administrator Holman said there's about 1,300 square feet, and I did some research that looks like that would be sufficient to feed the number of inmates that we have. I found estimates of up to $250 a square foot per building a commercial kitchen. So I'm not saying that's the right number, but that would be in the like $300,000 range. We spent about $710,000 on food last year to feed in the jail, if my numbers are right. So if we saved 10% of that by doing it ourselves or by doing it here, that'd be like $70,000 a year savings. So you'd be talking like a 4 or 5 year payback. I mean, maybe the numbers are wrong. I'm just like, again, EWAG, but at least it's plausible, makes sense to me, so I'm going to vote for it.
Supervisor Lamont.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question is similar to my last one. Has it been considered that we would use part of our Thomas Street building? We do have a renter there already. I'm concerned about space limitations at the jail. And also, you said there's a time issue, but there's going to be a time issue to do all the construction, everything there too. Was that looked into?
Deputy Administrator Holman will answer the.
Thank you for the promotion, Mr. Chair. In short, the answer is yes, we did look at multiple different locations, including the old kitchen space you referenced, and ultimately, when you looked at the cost it would take to expand the Thomas Street area, which I'm not sure where you would do it there, but let's presume there was a space, or in the old kitchen, or expanding North Central's current kitchen, it began to beg a lot of questions in terms of where does it make the most sense to invest those funds for the long term. And so when you take all the factors into consideration, and you're correct that there will be some phasing we'll have to do to get the work done in the space as is proposed to you today, we did look at all those angles and still arrived at the same conclusion.
Okay, Thank you.
Supervisor Seibert.
Thank you, Chairman Gibbs. I just have a question. If we okay phase one, how soon will phase two be brought in front of the board? And what kind of money are we talking about? 100,000, 150,000, 200,000? I mean, restaurant equipment is high priced, and you're also talking about time span. It could be a year on any kind of specialized restaurant equipment. So if an exchanger is going to be 50 weeks, how much is restaurant equipment going to be and how long? Thank you.
No, it's good questions. We looked into that as well. The only item we think that there might be some length of time to would be putting in a hood. But if there's a vendor that comes into that space, they may have access in their centralized warehouse, wherever that may be, where they could bring that in through some, arrange how that would work. But in terms of the square footage, even if you were looking at, say, $100 a square foot or $200 a square foot, if you were building all of the things that I referenced earlier that are already essentially in place, the costs are not, I can't give you an exact figure, but I think you're still looking at a minimal cost compared to others simply because of the square footage involved. And could you remind me of the first part of your question too? I apologize.
About phase one and phase two, how much, when is phase two going to be enacted?
Yes, no, thank you. If this is approved tonight, phase one begins tomorrow. And then phase two would not be too far on the horizon. If you were looking at a building something from the ground up, you maybe be looking at a 6-month window for design and getting to a schematic design, but we're not talking about that. So because it's a known space, because we already know that there's a lot of things we won't have to do in that space, it should be a much faster time frame in terms of getting a schematic design based on the limited needs that are actually there. And just my guess would be maybe a month to 2 months at maximum to get a schematic design in place, which then would be waiting for a couple pieces in terms of final equipment in there. But you would look at trying to make that space also flexible to fit, a tilt skillet or whatever else might be in there.
So the one more question I have is, why isn't the entire project phase one? Why are we going to be coming back to the board asking for money in 2 months, 3 months, when it should have been taken care of now? We should have had that price, that value.
Yeah, it's a good question. The typical process is that when you go through this, you'll get the schematic design. Once you have that design in place, which shows you all the things you really need to do based on that design concept, then that gives you what you need to go out and get the cost estimations that aren't just using a cost estimator tool. That's going to give you more of a kind of a course estimate that's not really honed in on the actual project itself. But once you have a more defined design in place and that schematic in place, then you know exactly what you're going to have to do. That then informs the next funding ask. So you could try to, and I've seen, seen counties have, even on larger projects, done intent resolutions and things like that for sums of money that ultimately didn't cover the bill. And so I think that rather than trying to make a really educated guess with the course estimate I mentioned earlier, it makes more sense to have the process inform the cost so that when we do come back, you know exactly what that cost is going to be, including any contingency.
Thank you.
Supervisor Boots?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that, first of all, this is mandated. We do have to feed the jail inmates. That's number one, I guess. Public Safety Committee has been apprised of all the information as far as what they had moving forward, as far as all the different options they were looking at. We had both Sheriff Billup, we had Chief Deputy Milhausen, we had Sandra Ledoux, the jail administrator, all involved. They were looking at several different options. They have done their due diligence to look at the good option for this. And yeah, I agree with the Chief Deputy. You want to call it Chief Deputy?
Another promotion. Yeah. Maybe.
That is the process for construction, especially in governmental agencies when there's certain things that are basically dictated by state statute also. So this is a no-brainer for me. So thank you.
Supervisor Lamont.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How long do you think it would take to recoup what it's going to cost to build this versus what we're paying for the vendor increase and also Lincoln County's increase, if we went back to the way we were doing it?
Does the deputy or the administrator wish to address it? Administrator Leonard?
I can take at least part of the question. When we determined, as Deputy Administrator Holman referenced at the last meeting, that the ideal solution that we were pursuing, which was having North Central Healthcare continue to deliver the meals, was not viable long-term, we did reach back out to the vendor to see if we could continue our previous relationship. And my recollection of that conversation from speaking with Jail Administrator Ledoux was they were not interested in doing that. And as Public Safety Chair Boots referenced, the jail did provide information relative to kind of the pieces that were driving, pieces that were driving that significant cost increase. It was not simply the significant increase in jail meal costs that's being seen across the state of Wisconsin. It was also the fact that we had to utilize the Lincoln County kitchen as the de facto kitchen to generate the meals, and then our facility was simply used for meal distribution. So I can't tell you how long it would cost us to, or how long, it would take for us to recoup the costs. I will say that we had done the math initially to expand the kitchen at North Central, and my recollection, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that cost was in the neighborhood of $400,000, and that at the time was the route that we were initially going to request the board to move forward with. This is a different course of action, of course, but as Chris laid out and Sandra referenced, Jail Administrator Ledoux referenced at the last meeting, this is, in my estimation, it's the best poor course of action you have. You don't have a course of action that is going to be something that I would like to present to you. This is a difficult space. As Chair Boots referenced, this is a mandated area. This gives us the flexibility to be in a position to better contract with a vendor than we currently are in. And should the staffing situation with vendors be such that we believe we can do it internally at less cost, it allows us to do that without the significant transportation costs that we're experiencing with North Central Healthcare, making the meals off-site and transporting them. I don't know, Chris, if you had any additional information relative to return on investment.
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can certainly get the question down and then do some work to get a more firm number on that. But I think your points are, making it very clear from my point of view in terms of why it's in front of us and what we're trying to grapple with here.
Supervisor Sandulski.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I support this too. It'll give us a lot more options for meals for the inmates and that, and also it'll, in the long run, it'll definitely save us quite a bit of money. So thank you much.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote on the motion to approve amending the 2023 capital improvement budget for the Marathon County Jail Kitchen Project in the amount of $64,205. Phase 1, transfer from ARPA. Resolution 23-23 does require a 2/3 majority vote. We will proceed to vote.
Kim? I'm a yes. I died here.
And you look pretty alive right now there, Supervisor, and awake even. We'll proceed to vote, or proceed to declare the vote. The motion is passed unanimous. Thank you. We'll move on to item G21, amending the 2023 capital improvement budget for the East Gate Hall Boiler Replacement Project, PO 0-8C, in the amount of $179,300, transfer from ARPA. Resolution 24-23. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Robinson, seconded by Supervisor Ritter. Any discussion? And we'll proceed to vote.
Kim, I'm yes again. I'm still alive. Glad to hear it.
Supervisor Hardinger, please. So you went to sleep? And we'll proceed. Thank you, and the motion is passed unanimously. Moving on to Health and Human Services Committee and Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee, H22, approve the 2023 budget transfers for for Health Department anti-tobacco vaping activity grant funds, Resolution 25-23. Motion by Vensky, second by Zhang. Any discussion? Seeing none, we will proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried and is unanimously. Item number H23, resolution of support for the utilization of state surplus funding to offset supplemental payments, decrease North Central Community Services Program Board, Resolution R-26-23. Motion by Vice Chair McEwen, second by Supervisor Crivelli. Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we will proceed to vote.
Yes.
And we will proceed. And the motion is carried and is unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to announcements. We need signatures from every committee except Public Safety and ERC. And one announcement, and that is this Thursday we have Western Towns in the town of Bern. There will be a light lunch served at 6:30 p.m. Any other announcements? Supervisor Zhang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I just want to start off by saying that 47 years ago on April 9th, 1976, Thong Sing Thaw and his family stepped off the plane at Central Wisconsin Airport. They were the first Hmong family to call Marathon County their home, and since then, Marathon County has been home to over 8,000 individuals. April has been declared as Hmong Heritage Month, and I ask my fellow supervisors to use this opportunity to learn about your Hmong neighbors, learn about their history, their contributions, accomplishments, and visit the From Laos to America Museum, the largest, if not one of the largest collections of Hmong artifacts in the country. You can find the museum at 200 Washington Street, Suite 100. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Langenhan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. After a request made by a county board supervisor, and I'm sure that many individuals have been hearing about activity on the western side of the county, I want to make an announcement that next week at the May 2nd, 2023 ERC meeting, we'll be having an educational presentation provided by our staff on the Marathon County General Code of Ordinances, Chapter 17, Wind Regulations, and the Public Service Commission 128, PSC 128, Wind Regulations 5, 4. Look, I beat the time. Have a good night, everybody.
Any other announcements and or requests? Seeing none, we will proceed to the next motion, and that is to adjourn. Motion by Supervisor Van Cray and seconded by Supervisor Zhang to adjourn. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Standing committees.